All right, welcome to News Talk with Brandon and Bob. I'm Brandon Jones. This is Robert Harriman.
Nice to see you again.
Editor-in-Chief, Outbreak News Today, the worm and germ guy himself.
Worm and germ guy.
Yes, as he's affectionately known by some.
Affectionately, Pops.
Yes, indeed. Pops on pop culture, amongst other things. So we're going to jump right in. Obviously, COVID has taken over the headlines again in many, many circles, and Anthony Fauci at the top of that list, where he has flip-flopped within weeks. It seems like one week he'll say one thing, another week he says the other, and he came out about masks and that kind of thing. You want to speak a little to that? You want me to go ahead and read what the article actually says here? Yeah. So this was a quote from him. Basically, the masks were not advised from the public when they were originally done, and he had basically come out and basically admitted that because we were concerned about PPE shortages, mask shortage, if we told people the truth that masks were beneficial, the people would buy all the masks, and then we'd have a faster shortage. So he basically confessed to this. He was speaking with The Street. He says how effective masks are. He says, quote, "Masks are not 100% protective. However, they are certainly better than not wearing a mask, both to prevent you, if you happen to be a person who maybe feels well but has an asymptomatic infection that you don't even know about, to prevent you from infecting someone else. But also, this is the important point, it can protect you a certain degree, not 100%, but protecting you from getting infected from someone who is either breathing, coughing, sneezing, singing, or whatever it is when droplets of aerosols go out. So masks work. It is important to actually the important thing is actual physical separation. So, of course, now he's gone on the learning curve. Well, that was actually later. So before I get to there, so he acknowledges that the masks were initially not recommended because of first responders. So he says that the health experts were concerned, the public health community, many people were concerned at that time when personal protective equipment, including N95 masks and surgical masks, were in short supply. So basically they're admitting that we didn't want to tell you that you could not only not infect someone else, but you could actually reduce the chances that you would get infected by wearing a mask, because people will buy all the masks.
Yeah. I'm glad they finally came clean. I was looking for a video I did a month and a half ago or so, saying that the CDC lied about this when they came out about that, because common sense dictates that any kind of coverage has to help a little bit, right? And I knew that was the reason why they were doing it, is because of the healthcare workers. However, the problem is you can't be lying to the public, because the public is already on shaky ground with public health as it is for a number of reasons, and this is not helping things. So, yeah, and Fauci, like you said, has flip-flop on a number of things, but I do appreciate that he's come out and finally acknowledged it. I haven't heard the CDC acknowledge the fib.
Fib, you're so nice. I purposely put this will say Fauci lied, people died.
Yeah.
Like you basically are contributing to the fact that people were like, well, I don't need a mask, we won't buy masks, we won't, or they'll buy, well, we'll use bandanas and we'll do whatever, and you're like, yeah, okay, what? It doesn't. I could have bought a mask a week ago. Why didn't I just buy a mask?
And the thing is, yes, the PPE situation was much more dire back then. And I think if you were just honest with the public, there's probably a lot of people that just would have said, okay, let the healthcare workers get it first, and let's ramp up production and get it out to the public. But
couldn't you have had businesses just pull it off the shelf? If you were so concerned, you'd be sure. You'd be like, all right, listen, we're going to have to pull them off the shelves, make sure the staff have them, and then they'll be in production. The other thing, too, that I want to add to this, too, make sure that you correct me if I'm wrong, because the initial emphasis was put so much on shifting resources to making ventilators instead of masks. So we told all these businesses, rework your entire factory, try to do all these things. Let's just make ventilators, spend all this money buying ventilators, transforming things that would work in that capacity, because of the fear of so many people having to be on that element of life support and not masks. So to me, that factors into it as well, where we also were not even focusing on the right element of resources. And now we have a plethora of ventilators, and the mortality on a ventilator is awful.
Yeah. And again, there is a learning curve here, and they are learning a lot. So naturally, mistakes are being made, but it still boils down to the lie. That's just what gets me the most.
Let me double down on how bad this gets.
And I really wish I could find that video, because I stated this quite a while ago.
He just doubled down on this. So this literally was in my notes prepping for this conversation. And he just did an interview with the Health and Human Services podcast called Learning Curve on Wednesday. One of the problems we face in the United States is that, unfortunately, there's a combination of an anti-science bias that people are, for reasons that are sometimes inconceivable and not understandable, that they just don't believe science and they don't believe authority. He goes on to talk about science is truth and evidence. Okay, you just lied to us. You just admitting to lie to us. You have flip-flopped over and over and over again, and we're supposed to still be like, you wonder why this sentiment is not, first, that not only existed, as you're bringing out, it has gotten so much worse.
Yeah. And any serious topic that they bring up from now on is going to be met with skepticism amongst the public. And, and I said, I think it was on our first show, that Dr. Anthony Fauci is the consummate politician / bureaucrat,
yeah.
and he sure is.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah. But yeah, it's really a shame that you can't have any faith in the public health community because so many people are really relying on it, and I think it's getting damaged.
Okay, so let's review for people to understand that a mask that is down here isn't doing anybody any good. It's not doing yourself or anybody any good, right? It has to cover both your mouth and your nostrils, right? And when I sneeze and I'm in the mask, I'm at least reducing the distance that any particle could get through, and it would possibly propel, let's say, 2 feet instead of, say, 4 feet. I don't know, whatever the distance is.
I mean, there was a study that came out earlier this week where they were testing sneezes and hard coughs in a mask, and they did find droplets that could go. Of
course, it can. There's no way. It's going to be individuals, right?
But it does reduce things, and it's not going to prevent everything, and nobody's ever said that.
Right.
I mean, so, you have an N95 mask, that's one thing.
But that's the premise of you're wearing the mask, I sneeze, it's reducing the distance. Now, how is you wearing your mask helping prevent you? Is it just the chance that droplet lands on your mouth or your nose?
It just reduces it even more, but the primary reason is for the person that may be infected.
Mm-hmm. To be sneezing and coughing particles.
Preventing those droplets. Remember, some of the studies are kind of iffy on this, but it's primarily droplet transmission, not so much aerosol. Would be something where I would sneeze and it would linger, like measles, and it would linger in the air for an hour or two or whatever.
It stays in the air.
Yeah.
This is not like that.
The droplet's too large, so it does drop almost immediately.
So imagine gravity, folks. So when you think about something being airborne, think about something that you see in a lot of science fiction movies and action thrillers where people are putting something in the air and it just stays in the air and gas. You don't see it, but people breathe it and they're infected. Whereas this is more like the droplet. It is prone to gravity, so it's going to do whatever and just fall basically on that, right? So that's kind of so your mask. You're wearing a mask, hopefully over your nostrils and your mouth to prevent the distance or how much can escape. Yeah. Then you wearing the mask could prevent you getting sneezed on. But that is significantly less in the grand scheme of things, I guess.
Secondary.
Most of that's going to be you get it on your hands or something like that, and then you put it in your face, you put it on your mouth.
Well, yeah, and that's true of almost any kind of respiratory disease, colds, flus, or anything is touching something, having that contaminant on your hand, then either put it on your mucous membranes, eyes, nose, mouth. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that a lot of people catch colds via rubbing their eyes.
Sure.
Yeah. Just that's the portal for the virus. So yeah, masks are useful, and like I said, I've been using them before because I'm a junior prepper, and I had N95 masks already in stock, and we were using them long before this all.
Now, an N95 mask was said to be much more effective at preventing you getting it as well as you sneezing on someone else. So the filtrations and the mechanisms were better.
It's supposed to filter out exactly that 95% of particulates and stuff. So
right. Okay. All right. In your opinion, as now, because he goes on to talk about it's inconceivable that we have a trust issue. It's so difficult that we've become anti-science and all that. We've had this situation with the WHO and the Chinese government and CDC and now Fauci, where there's been a lot of like back and forth over things that are, to me, are beyond the scope of just learning. You mentioned learning, which I totally understand. I was the one that was like, we need to be much more cautious and shutting down, slowing things down. February and March, we really didn't know much, gather data. Now we've learned a ton. We know a lot. where are we now on? Because all the news that we hear is just that there's so many more cases. Testing's through the roof. A lot of cases. A lot of the cases here in Florida. DeSantis spoke yesterday, talked about most of these age ranges for most people were in the 30s and 40s. Right. They were below 50, so they are very low risk depending on what other health complications they have. So therefore, there's really not an area of concern. Even the death projections that I've seen in the capacity of ICU bed graphs, again, go to worldometers.info. There's graphs for this. It doesn't even project changes in that bump anytime soon. Am I hitting the bullseye so far? I mean, where am I? Am I off base anywhere yet?
No, I mean, I personally am not surprised. I mean, the numbers just came out for Friday. We went over 4,000 in one day, so that's a one-day record. Am I surprised? No. I mean, I go out, I use my mask. A lot of people are not. So yeah, that's and the fact that the numbers are dropping as far as the age range, again, not surprising, because when I go to the stores and stuff, it's typically old farts like me that are wearing the mask, and it's not the young people. So I think it was prudent for Jane Castor to, though I don't like the word mandate, but that's what it was, mandating masks in businesses, because we do need to get this down, because right now I have to be that much more careful about being around my mother.
Sure.
Right. I mean, there's just a greater chance.
You're at a higher risk of carrying it and then giving it to someone who could be vulnerable.
Just because it's circulating right now more than it was a few weeks ago.
Right.
I don't think people are really on Reddit and stuff like that. They're really down on DeSantis right now, and I don't know if that's fair.
But my issue is, and I go back to this, because it's still a social distance or wear a mask. There's still an or pretty much in a lot of the recommendations. Like if I'm not near anybody, physically near anybody, what is it if I am like? So I saw a video of protesting yesterday, and in this image they all had masks, but they were literally standing shoulder to shoulder. Where are we at on the risk factor for? I got a mask, so I'm okay to just do whatever I want to do.
That's not ideal either, just because of what we talked about. That yes, the droplets could still leave the mask, and the 6 feet
social distancing. That's very wise and prudent, because droplets aren't going to typically go farther than that. So social distancing is very useful, especially if you're outside or even inside. I mean, we're not social distancing well right now. No, we've considered each other in our circles.
Right.
But if I go to the store, a lot of times I don't have a mask. I literally just don't go near anyone. They have self-checkouts. It's 9 a.m. I even see someone in the aisle. I just either wait for them to move, or I just don't go anywhere near them.
And plus, all these employees should be wearing masks now.
Well, they would be more likely to be sneezing or coughing on something that someone could come right behind them. Yeah. But for me, that almost have to be sneezed or coughed on, because I'm just not around anybody. So I'm just trying to get a scope of if I'm at a protest or rally, I'm standing next to them where they have a mask on. First, if you're assuming they're wearing it right, and then two, what about any other transmission? Is there any other transmission? I mean, it's not like a bodily fluid transmission. It has to be an internal respiratory transmission, correct?
Right. Like I said, it's sneezes, coughs. A lot of places like churches aren't doing their choirs now, because when you're singing or yelling or whatever,
right.
That's a concern, because you're going to produce more droplets that are going to spread for a distance. It's part of the concern with what's going on in Oklahoma today. Right? If these people aren't wearing masks in this confined quarters. But I think social distancing and mask use should be used in concert and not dividing them. Now, if I'm walking down the street, I shouldn't worry about any of the above. But it's just this close contact type stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think it's been pretty clear for quite some time now, this is what we should be doing. Yeah, so I mean...
Do you think there's a certain element of let's move along herd immunity? Like there's a positive to this in a certain extent, that getting a whole bunch of 30 and 40-year-olds through their infection process, getting them through their 2 to 3 weeks and their circles and whatever. I mean, is there some benefit? That's what we see in Sweden, right? They just didn't shut down. Everybody gets it. But we don't know antibody results. We don't know how effective that is.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's the Sweden theory. However, their numbers aren't very high. They just recently did a study, and it's somewhere around 5 to 10% herd immunity.
That's it, huh?
To get this under control according to Mike Osterholm from CIDRAP, it should be about 60 to 70%.
I'm going to say 60% is what I've heard.
It's got to be pretty high. So we're not even close. And the other concerns, of course, is how much immunity is conferred by these antibodies. They just did a study this week also saying that it's maybe only 2 or 3 months worth of immunity. So
at some point, though,
it's short-lived.
But that again, so at that point, you become a generation of people that are going to become very just bitter and jaded. They're not going to wear masks every single day forever now, just because this is out there, and it's just not. It's just going to have to go as like we basically become into an element where this can become the purge at that point, because there's just no way you're going to tell 300 million people that the immune response is 5%. We got to get to 60 or 70, and during that time, by the way, we have no vaccines, no hopes of that. This thing could have changed, and you're just going to have to wear a mask the whole time and/or social distance. People are just not going to do that. It's just not going to happen.
Well, like I said in previous news talks, it's going to be with us a while.
Yeah, it's not going away.
Get used to us.
This wasn't really a surprise, right? I don't know. Do you consider this as a second wave?
No.
Okay. Do you think that this is just a precursor to? I mean, obviously, if we had 3,000, we had 4,000 yesterday here in Florida. Will we not? Do we just not know, or we find out in a week, or are we just? This is how it's going to be for a while. We're going to have thousands of people getting it. The death rates still don't look like it's going to change a whole lot, because that seems to be much more concentrated in nursing homes, assisted living, those kind of populations.
Something we talked about previously.
We did talk about. Mm-hmm. So these two variables really are almost like running independent of one another, in that the infection from that 3,000 to 4,000 into that pocket, it's not moving that number very much. Mm-hmm. And therefore, we're going to see this during the summer. We have a whole lot of cases regularly. The death is pretty flat, maybe see a little bit of an uptick, but it's manageable by the hospital. We're nowhere near capacities.
Right.
And that heads into the fall, where we traditionally have a worse flu season, more vulnerability to weather changes, things like that. That's pretty much, nothing's really changed, right?
No. I mean,
the flattening of the curve gave us more information, made us assess medical care, things like that, but nothing else has really changed.
Yeah, and I suspect that we're going to see this 4,000 a day go to 6,000 to whatever number, until people start abiding by common sense. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's going to happen. It may not. And going back to Fauci, I think there's a lot less trust. But I think he's also being aided and abetted by the media, who never, ever call him out for this stuff.
Yeah, it's been brutal. I'm not particularly thrilled with where we are, because I'm not a big fan of having to wear a mask in Disneyland. I'm not a big fan of having to go to the movie theater tell me I have to wear masks. For example, I'm just going to buy food. I'm going to walk in a movie theater with my mask on, go to the concession stand, buy my snack, and then I'm going to sit down in my chair, take my mask off, and eat my food. And if you don't like it, then I guess they'll have to give me a fine, or they'll call the police on me, like Jane Castor's NARC line or whatever she installs. That's what the tattletale numbers that she's in place now. Just insane.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to city. Are you in city of Tampa?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, crap, man. I
work in the city of Tampa.
Yeah, because I don't think I'm technically in city of Tampa. I'm on the other line. So for me, I'm not playing in their tattletale universe. It's crazy.
Well, I suspect that Hillsborough County will pick this up soon.
No, it's going to be the thing to do, especially if we have 3,000 to 6,000 cases. People will be like, oh, you're not wearing a mask, and call the hotline on you. I'm like, what are you going to do? I mean, it's what it says. So, all right, folks, tell me what you think.
Yeah.
Tell me how you feel about Fauci. My wife's just fed up with Fauci, man. It only takes so long for her to flip-flop, and I felt like I could see that happening in real time. So for him to not understand where some of this is coming from, I say it's inconceivable. I'll use your own word against you, buddy. It is inconceivable that you can't see what you've done and the damage that you've caused. So tell us what you think. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll do more stuff on this topic and other things here to come.
If this show happened now, you'd be like The Walking Dead. This show is so well. It was so well written, especially in season 1. It's just incredible. Yeah. And you probably still have people coming up and calling you Jake and wanting to talk about the show.
Yeah, I think Netflix has given new life to a lot of things. If somebody missed it, now they're catching up on it and seeing it as if we just filmed it. And it was an incredible group of people. I mean, a lot of times in this business you lose touch with people because you're going different directions all the time, but that's a group that I've stayed in touch with consistently over the years, and we've all stayed friends, and including Turtle Tab and Kareem's Rake. In fact, they just asked me to direct a feature for them.
Oh, cool.
I directed my first short film and showed them a rough cut of it, and they were like, "We want you to direct something." So they gave me a script, and we're in the middle of figuring that story out and moving forward with it. But yeah, we've all stayed in touch and stayed really close, and I think that speaks to what a special group of people it was, and remains and still is. So yeah, I was very fortunate, and I agree. The first season was incredibly well written. The second season, we lost a lot of the key components because we were canceled, and those people went on to other jobs thinking it was over. And then, when they reassembled whatever team was left, and they knew they were going to truncate that story so much just to wrap it up, it was a bit disheartening. We knew we had much better story to tell than what we were left to tell. But that's the business, unfortunately. Sometimes
you may want to be Jericho 20 years later. Who knows? We'll be having you back. I've always wanted to see, the sequel to Jericho would be set in a different city to see it play out.
Yeah.
So I know it would be hard to get all of you guys back and kind of pick up. So it's like, all right, well, let's run it again, and instead of being in Jericho, Kansas, let's be in, someplace someplace in Mississippi or something, and kind of you're playing it out in the same scenario. And anyway, just a thought for that. So
yeah, no, that'd be fun, and we could have really good accents. Like, I think there was a bomb that went off somewhere.
Well, yeah, a whole different survival techniques, I guarantee, in the bayou, my friend.
Exactly.
Welcome back to News Talk. I'm going to throw it right to Bob. This segment we're going to talk about COVID, but we're going to talk about something much more specific. We're going to talk about a country that you're not hearing much about. We did you did some work on Brazil. We talked about that on Outbreak News today, and some of that stuff's on our Twitter page and those kinds of things. Hit me up with what's going on with Yemen.
Well, Yemen, the Doctors Without Borders put out a message saying, hey, we got a serious crisis going on in Yemen. Not a big surprise. The numbers aren't really high, but this is an incredibly, incredibly vulnerable population.
So let me stop. I don't mean to interrupt, but we may have somebody who doesn't know. So Yemen, a very small country on the eastern side of Africa.
It's in the Middle East.
Technically in the Middle East. Okay, so war-torn area, riddled with violence, riddled with poverty, shortages of any resources. Yeah. And I think you and I had privately talked, long before News Talk was even conceived, was what is it going to be like when COVID hits Africa, Middle East, South America, these countries that already are just, they're almost like wastelands in some of those areas where the governments and stuff have stuff and the people do not. Now it's in Yemen. Talk about the healthcare system and where we're at. Where are we on the timeline, in your opinion, and then, what's really going on?
Well, in Yemen, as you know, for the past 5+ years or so, there's been a battle, a war going on between the Iranian Houthi-backed rebels and Saudi Arabia. And the United States and Great Britain have been providing Saudi Arabia with these weapons to basically I'm not saying one side is good and one side is bad.
Those are more like the Wahhabi Muslims, if I understand it properly.
And they've just been blowing up. You have Yemen, which is this country that's incredible poverty, surrounded by all these oil-rich countries. It's just an anomaly, right? And Saudi Arabia has just been blowing up this country, and it's turned into rubble. And the healthcare infrastructure, regular infrastructure, everything is just trashed. And the health for the population is just in shambles. Malnutrition's
always been a problem
through the roof, right? And let me segue into COVID because of that. Right now, Yemen only has 900 plus COVID cases, and I suspect that's because they just don't have the infrastructure to do all this testing.
They're probably not even doing testing.
Right.
I'm shocked that we even know data in most of these places.
Right. But I assume that the testing that is being done is probably serious cases that are hospitalized.
Sure.
I doubt they have drive-throughs.
Yeah, no, definitely. I can assure you, folks, if you can find a photo of a drive-through COVID testing in Yemen that we can verify, we will send you a gift from the pop culture universe of prizes. I will gladly take ownership of that photo.
So I think the concern is, all right, 900 cases, there's been 250 deaths. So we got a 27% fatality
That's a
rate.
horrible fatality rate, because
that's
so
huge.
so they're either testing people that they know basically have it and they're headed towards ventilator type status based on our technology, or they're just not really doing much testing. I don't know.
Well, I suspect it's because, right, we know the population here in the United States that gets the most ill, right? Right. Over there, if you got millions and millions of people, no food, and massive malnutrition,
Okay.
their immune systems are trashed.
Yeah, they don't have an elderly population because of the war-torn nature of the environment.
It's a very young population.
But most of the people there have so many health deficiencies and, like you said, malnutrition, immunocompromised. Is that also an area that's been ravaged by other infectious disease and things like that? Yeah.
Well, yeah. If people haven't been paying attention for the past couple of years, Yemen's gone through a massive diphtheria outbreak because they haven't been able to get vaccines. Saudi Arabia's been doing blockades around the country so they couldn't get supplies, and including food and medicines and stuff. Diphtheria is something they haven't seen since like the 80s or 90s, and all of a sudden they have this outbreak. And of course, the thing that's most well known, I would suspect, is more than 2 million cholera cases since 2018, which is, for us in America, we always think back to 2010 when Haiti had the earthquake, and over a decade they had 800,000 cholera cases. This is more than doubled. It's the largest cholera outbreak in modern history.
What's the death toll from a 2 million person cholera outbreak?
Oh, it's fairly low, because if you're able to
Stay
keep people
hydrated.
hydrated, people will usually survive, because it can frequently be self-limiting. So it's probably 1 to 2%.
Okay.
So
But it's still a massive number in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
Definitely more than the 900 COVID deaths that we've already had.
Well,
Cases.
Cases, right? Yeah. So Yemen's just a mess, and it's just a really sad situation. And putting on my non-interventionist hat, I don't think the United States should be. This started with Obama, and it's continuing with Trump, and I think we should get out of that.
Well, and again, my situation is with Yemen. While I'm no fan of the Saudi situation and this Iran-Saudi proxy war that everyone's kind of running, there's no good people to work with here.
No, there's not.
Right? There's Saudis in this for themselves. The Yemen population, you have these guerrilla warlords. So I've heard stories of missionaries and different things where they go in, they try to land a plane, they move the supplies into the town. They either attack the convoy bringing the supplies, they attack the people in the town, they'll execute everyone in the town. I mean, it's just, it's literally just Mad Max.
Well, there's no white hats and black hats here.
Yeah, there are no white hats.
I never said that. I don't think we should be involved.
They're just making sure people, if they don't know much about Yemen, because we probably are way more connected to foreign affairs and covering some of these causes. Because let's be honest, in the last how many years what foreign stories get attention? Only things that involve Orange Man bad narratives, North Korea, Iran, things that were short-lived in the grand scheme of things. But all the relationships with the Saudis, proxy war, drone use, these kinds of things, none of that's making the press anytime soon. And even then, most people didn't follow it under President Obama. We were in the minority of even knowing what most of that was going on. So I don't think I would doubt most people without looking can tell us where Yemen is on a map.
No, I'm sure of that.
Yeah, so now we have this people where it's just basically going to be a massive death toll if COVID just runs through the population because medical care is likely just non-existent, right? And forget about ages. Was this going to mess up global data at all? Or just, there won't be that big of a blip.
No, I mean, looking at the 188 countries that have reported cases, Yemen it is a blip.
Yeah.
However, just that case fatality rate is enormous. It's higher than anything Italy ever had.
Oh yeah. No, we're talking more than double. More than double the worst of Italy. Not even like the peak of Italy got into the neighborhood of 12%. But that was short-lived because that was the peak of their hospitals being overrun and all that. Obviously, those numbers have all become manageable now.
I suspect it's lower. It's actually lower than 27%.
Right. There's no testing. Yeah. There's no information,
but
no data.
Just, I'll say Doctors Without Borders, they do a pretty exemplary job on this kind of stuff. These people are volunteers and they're going all over the world doing this kind of work, and they are not known for blowing a lot of hot air. they're pretty straightforward.
I would be shocked if you can prove that Doctors Without Borders are making up stats and data. And that's just not. I've never ever, even when the media was trying to paint them in poor lights over the years for whatever reason, it was all just garbage.
Yeah. They're pretty on target. So
so a lot of T's and P's going up for the Yemeni population. This is a horrible thing, man. You're just trying to find some food. Next thing you know, you got a virus. You don't even know why. And
next thing, a bomb's coming down.
Just drones flying overhead, and it's just like
I mean, and this is really. I have some numbers here, but I think we're good now. But
yeah, I
mean, the way this is affecting children, UNICEF and World Vision, the Christian organization, they're all over there trying to do stuff to help out these kids. It's a sad situation.
Yeah, I don't even know what to do. There should almost be a way we can just. I don't want to take kids away from their family, but many of these kids are just going to be orphaned, and at some point you're just like, let's just relocate them and figure out a way to put them in a home and figure it out, because this is crazy.
And it's not going to get better. I think they had a temporary ceasefire when the first case of COVID happened in Yemen.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that's at now. I haven't found out.
Wow. All right, folks. Well, tell me if you can find Yemen on a map. COVID. You aren't hearing this on CNN, I assure you that. News Talk. Outbreak News Today guy, telling you, he knows what's going on. If you want to know what's really going on with COVID and what's going on with different outbreaks, infectious disease, he's the guy. Different things that we'll try to bring up from time to time here on News Talk. We appreciate your time. Hey, we're News Talk with Brandon and Bob. We're here to tell you about some of the facts so you don't have to waste your time watching CNN.
We don't want you wasting any time with CNN.
Or Fox, or MSNBC, or some of these other guys that are making a whole lot of money.
Et cetera, et cetera.
He's not paying me.
Start talking the news. It's Brandon and Bob. It's time to be a part of it. News Talk, News Talk.
All right, welcome to News Talk. I'm Brandon Jones, Robert Harriman.
Hi.
We're going to jump right back into more COVID talk and New York City making more news.
Never enough.
It's kind of tragic. We're like spinning a wheel of things, and we end up on this one, and we'll get to some other stuff here soon. I want to encourage you to stick around and tell us some of the topics that you'd like to hear as well, in case we don't cover something. But this is, it's really bad. It's
disturbing.
It is really disturbing. So, it really came to, at least it came to light. You see the little clip where Kayleigh McEnany, how you say McEnany? How you say his name?
I didn't see the clip, no. Yeah.
Oh, so she's doing a press briefing, and Jim Acosta talks about, aren't you concerned with the Trump rallies that we're going to have all these people and you're not having masks and whatever? And she's like, well, yeah, I mean, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to mandate masks. Well, aren't you concerned? Blah, blah, blah. So she holds up the New York, make sure I got it right, New York Post. And there's a photo on the New York Post of all the protesters on one side of the page, Trump rally on the other side of the page. And then it was like, good, bad.
Different captions.
And it was like, wow. She held it up in the press briefing. Like, I sure hope that we see more headlines and coverage like this, too. Yes, the Trump administration is concerned. He's trying to advise people they should wear a mask, whatever. But we'd also love to see media coverage of events like this. Then we find out, again, New York City always has the best backstories of corruption and cover-up that should just shock us to our core. They're the worst COVID numbers and horrible death toll in our country, and we find out over and over again there's always more to the story. So here's another one. So they're trying to put together COVID data, and Bill de Blasio's office, this is Avery Cohen, and they are doing contact tracing for COVID positives. And this is put out on the Tampa Dispatch. You can also see information through New York Post, and we'll get to some of the others here as well, including, I believe, Deadline talks a little bit about it. Basically, no one will be asked proactively if they attended a protest, Cohen has said, the spokesman for de Blasio. This was an emailed response to the city website. They were the one that broke the story that test and trace workers ask COVID-positive individuals general questions that help them, quote, recall contacts and individuals that they may have exposed. Well, do you live with anyone in your home? Jonah Bruno, an agency spokesman, says, well, we're working with the New York City to balance the public health priority while also protecting personal privacy. We seek to ensure a thorough contact tracing program that helps us contain the COVID-19 virus and monitor any fluctuations in the infection rate as we continue reopening New York. Then they quote a doctor from Columbia, Dr. Patrick Couture, Kachur, from Columbia. This is public health official, says, I think the logic has to do with the fact that contact tracing requires a strong level of trust between the interviewer and the person they're talking to. It's really important to have a good rapport and treat people with ease. It's important not to ask questions that will impede on your ability to do the best job you can. Again, we don't ask them about going to a protest. Okay? Then he says this is the professor of public health advice discussing New York City. There's definitely a concern that state and city officials have that the protest could be a place where transmission occurs, but the risk is lower than the household and other community contacts. It would be really challenging to trace those contacts who you've been protesting with. Well, of course, but we're still not going to try to discuss that or at least have that in their factors.
But I don't think that's the reason. That's not what he just said is not the reason why they don't want to ask the question.
No, he's politically.
They want to manipulate public health data to keep the arrows pointed at the protest as a possible.
They don't want you to think the protest is where you can get this. They don't want you to think that that's remotely a stigma at all. They want to keep that in a positive light, just like the Kaylee stunt where she holds up the paper.
I'm sorry. In by definition, by not asking those questions, that is not contact tracing.
No, you're omitting information.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's very dangerous. And I believe that if that was going on in the state of Florida,
Ron DeSantis is already under fire. And
he would be toast.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
So, again, everything is politicized, and it's harming public health, in my opinion.
And it doesn't matter to me.
We need to know if some of these little sparks are starting at these protests.
It doesn't matter if it's a Trump rally or it's a Black Lives Matter protest or rally. It should be part of your questions. Have you been to any event, including rallies or protests? That's how I would word my question, right? Have you been to any event, including rallies or protests, in the last 14 days to 3 weeks, whatever the appropriate timeline would be for the way they work their questionnaires? Yeah. I mean, I don't understand why we have to make it. You don't have to mention names. Like, we don't need to call out Black Lives Matter. We don't have to call out any of these poor individuals that have lost their lives that have sparked some of these rallies and protests. We don't have to call out the political candidates by name. It doesn't matter if they've been to a Biden rally. It doesn't matter if they've been to a local politician running for office and they had 70 people.
Just the fact that they were in a crowd.
Because then you had 70 people.
Yeah. Because I guarantee they're going to contact trace in Tulsa today, if anything.
They will be there taking photos of every single person. We're recording this live on a Saturday. It will come out on Tuesday. So you're watching this, you will already have heard what will happen in Tulsa. Yeah. I'm going to predict people will be watching this and they can tell us how accurate we are. We will see tomorrow morning on Sunday papers. We will hear in Sunday talk shows. They will not be about Father's Day. It will, in fact, be about the people in Tulsa not wearing masks and not social distancing.
But, for all the people in the media and social media and elsewhere that are always science, I'm sorry, this is not science. This is manipulating public health data, which is supposed to help us. Well, not science. Man.
You were exasperating my love of and frustration with New York in this situation of this horrible tragedy and pandemic, in that now Governor Andrew Cuomo is rebuking even in the slightest of questions in his handling of assisted living and nursing home patients that had gotten COVID anyway, that his possible mishandling of this, because he was sending positive patients back to their facility instead of keeping them isolated in a hospital. Right. Correct. So now what was his response? And
he's saying every time people bring that up, they are politicizing the matter. So and so far he's gotten away with it. That's a really sad thing, right? He's gotten away with it. Nobody's really calling him out on it. Now I get it that I'm not in New York City, obviously, but I'm picturing it, right? And you're concerned that the hospitals there were probably crazy when this was.
I don't have any sympathy for this.
Right. No, I'm just saying. So they have limited room. So if you had people that were going there with few or no symptoms that were positive, you didn't want to take up hospital beds because there were so many serious people. So yeah, you have to put them somewhere. That was probably the place where you could put them on that boat, that
Thank you.
ship.
Yep, that's exactly where I was going to go.
Places instead of sending them back to a nursing home.
Yep.
You know, I get it. Those ERs and those hospitals were probably off the charts. I can't even imagine the way it was at that time. But that decision, I'm sorry.
We found out.
It's not being politicized. It's a fact.
We found out after the fact that we barely used the number of beds that were on the Comfort, the ship that we had sent there. We had barely used any of the resources at these sort of makeshift medical tent facilities that were there in the nearby areas. We found out that these are resources that were available. And even if you just use them for isolation of these are seniors who are high risk just because of their age. Maybe they're not, who cares if they're high risk? Just they have it. We don't want to send them back to speed up the timeline.
A high risk place.
And then now it is incontrovertible. I'm sorry, it's evil to believe that a man has found out, in theory, my grandma could have gone to this hospital, found out she's positive, you would have sent her back. And then she would have infected the person in the same room or the nearby room or whatever, and then that person gets it and they die. Yeah. That is awful. And that there was basically a political decision and not in the best interest of the care. And we say that because not all the resources were being used.
Yeah. I just think it's a shame that somebody like Andrew Cuomo, who's got massive popularity up there because of this, he can't show any honor and be humble enough to admit I was wrong.
Well, the worst part is this isn't over. We were just discussing in another segment, COVID's not over. No. We're headed into the summer of COVID, the COVID summer. So sure, New York's seeing some numbers that have dipped down now, which are really more like in relative to where they were, not like it's gone away. Well, we'll head back into the fall. COVID's not going away. So it's not like you can continue to not have a policy on this or speak to this because there will be positives in nursing homes and assisted livings. What are you going to do with those patients? Are you going to send them back? What about... What do governors and leaders take away from all of this and what they could or should have done if you don't have a Comfort and medical tents? And how do you isolate? And what are some of your thoughts on what have been the best practices or things that what we should actually do?
Well, I mean, at the time, they also had the opportunity because all the hotels were empty. They could have
they could have designated whole hotels.
Yeah, they could have done all kinds of stuff. I don't know if you're going to have that same availability in the future.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I don't think we're going to be having the federal government spend millions of dollars to transform the Javits Center into a 1,000-bed hospital. So I'm not sure how that's going to be handled, But it's got to be handled better than the way Cuomo and Murphy and some of the others took care of it.
What is the latest on other places like that, like in New Jersey and some other hot spots and those kinds of things? So all the focus has shifted to the states that have reopened, Florida and Texas in particular, the two that are kind of on.
Yeah. I mean, their numbers have dipped, so they're getting kudos, and the 20-odd states that are cranking up, mostly southern and western states.
That opened, that did not have cases, and now they do have cases, and it's spiraling exponentially.
And you could see, the media salivating over these numbers. And
how
stuff
to
like that.
Politicize it,
Yeah, I mean, and each state is a little bit different, too. I mean, I don't think, even though Florida's numbers are at a record high, we are nowhere like the situation that's going on in Arizona right now, where they are reaching very, very close to capacity in a lot of hospitals. So each place is different. You shouldn't.
Why is Arizona at capacity?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Do you know the geography of where they have cases and where they don't? Is that part of it?
Well, if they're at capacity, I would assume it's in the major cities.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
because in Florida,
that's an assumption. I don't have.
In Florida, if you look at the grids and the maps, you were still seeing massive numbers still growing in Miami and Palm Beach and these kind of areas. Now we're seeing some with around Orlando and Hillsborough County, but most of Florida still. Very small numbers.
And I suspect that's the way it is in Arizona. It's probably the Phoenix area.
Phoenix and Tucson, Albuquerque.
Mesa, whatever. Yeah.
In those cities out there.
That's a guess. I don't know that for a fact. But even here, Hillsborough County has 5,000 cases. You go up a couple counties to go down to Highlands County, it's like 200 cases. So,
there's hardly anything like in Spring Hill. My friend lives in Spring Hill. He's saying something to me. I was like, dude, at the time there were like 12. I'm like, there's 12 active cases. I think that those people are probably not going to be at the Walmart. I think your numbers are pretty good to live your life.
But I mean, Hillsborough and Orange County are cranking up, and
Well, they're highly dense.
high population.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out.
What is the lag time on data out of New York City or anything like that? Do we know if these contact tracers and those kind of things? What is it on? Do you get data pretty regularly? Do we know?
No. Well, if you're concerned about, are they going to be able to figure out the numbers went up because of a potential protest, I would start looking at them pretty soon, because the protests were the end of May, beginning of June.
We had their first couple, but it really.
But they continue in some of these cities.
Sure.
They don't go away. 2 to 3 weeks, you should start seeing.
Yeah.
I mean, now granted, and the argument that MSNBC and all them are making for the protesters is, yes, it's outside. Most are wearing masks. A lot of them are wearing masks because they don't want to be seen.
Sure.
I mean, but that's.
Yeah, I know.
That's a motivation. But yeah. So I would expect it might not be as bad as people say, but who knows?
All right.
Who knows?
Tell us what you guys think. Tell us what the media said about Tulsa. Were we right? I think we're going to be right.
Tulsa.
New York City and Cuomo. Good hats and bad hats. We're talking about black and white hats, and it's just the media. It's such a fallacy. It's really frustrating.
So
And sad part is that this is so serious that people's lives are at stake. So, all right. Well, that's another topic there on New York City. Tell us your thoughts and share, like, and subscribe, and join our audience there.
But until you eliminate schools being gun-free zones, you're really not going to solve the problem. The problem is that we have gun-free zones where people that want to kill a lot of people know about it and will be able to go out and get a weapon because, again, murder is against the law. It's not like the law is the problem here. It's not like we got to add more laws and all of a sudden people are going to be like, well, I would have gone and killed all those people, but since, now there's a ban on getting weapons from 18 to 21, I see the error in my ways now and I'm not going to do it. Like, it's idiot thinking to think that that's going to happen anyway. So in all reality, what needs to happen is we need to much better arm the teachers and the personnel in those schools so when something like this happens, they don't kill nearly as many people. And if you look at the statistics, if you do a mass shooting in a gun-free zone, the number of people that die on average is 14. If you do one in a place where they allow for concealed carry and someone's able to meet them, right then and there on the spot, the average number of people that die is 4. Those 10 deaths are on every person that advocates for a gun-free zone. If they want to talk about blood being on the hands of people, if you advocate for a gun-free zone, every 14 people that die in one, 10 of them are on you. Because we should have had guns in there and they should have had people that were allowed to defend those students in there, and they didn't. Because the thing about it is this, and again, I hate to go cliche on everything, but when seconds count, the police are minutes away. And you cannot wait for the police to show up in order to stop an active shooter. It has to be done by someone there who's armed, who's able to stop it. And I just wish that they understood that. And it's too many times that we have a Republican legislature that won't actually go all the way, a Democrat legislature that wants to take all the guns away, and neither side is able to actually solve the problem.
Pops on pop culture moment. Best westerns of all time. So sometimes I get the studio, especially we have no movies, right? So let's just be honest, right? Like every few weeks we get one digital movie, and I'm not getting screeners for most of them. I actually knew about some of these more recent ones, and I don't have a screener. But instead, I got offered. I guess it's because Father's Day. We're filming this ahead of Father's Day. It was Dads love westerns. Do you like westerns?
Never a big fan, but my dad did, and so I remembered movies like True Grit.
Okay.
And stuff like that.
The John Wayne one.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I was never a fan.
Not a fan.
Unforgiven was okay.
Okay.
But of the Clint movies, it was
Not your thing?
the top for me. Yeah.
Have you seen a lot of Westerns? Most people haven't seen
No,
Westerns.
that's why, because I was inundated with that as a kid.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it just didn't do anything for me. If I gave it a shot now, maybe I'd be different now.
I have to admit, this has been good for me because I actually kind of, like yourself, my grandfather was my influence in that arena. Loved watching Westerns, mostly John Wayne Westerns. It was pretty much John Wayne Westerns. I mean, poor Clint didn't make it really into the cycle. And I do have an appreciation for a lot of those. And I kind of put together, there's been movie reviews all over Tampa Dispatch. And if you go on to Pops on Pop Culture Facebook page, you'll see me putting up these different reviews on these different Westerns. I've kind of compiled a list of what some of the best Westerns are. And I will say a lot of the old Westerns are pretty good. However, there's a certain stigma of what Hollywood Westerns were during that time frame. But like if you remember these John Wayne, directed by John Ford Westerns, and we can go back further than that, but it's always very clean, right? They're no one's getting a black eye. No one's getting bloodied up. They get shot. There's just like a blood spot on the middle of their back. No one is having their guts shot. No one's getting shot in the face.
It was a different time.
Right? A lot of the shots have these long, large, wide panoramic shots with orchestra music and not oranges and pretty colors and landscapes, that kind of thing, right? So this is how most Westerns and a lot of these lists are full of those. And I mentioned The Searchers in a previous segment. John Wayne movie, Rio Bravo. These are the kind of movies that I think about. Of the ones that I watched, I haven't finished it, but Magnificent Seven is kind of at the top of my list on that. But that's mostly because it was such an incredible cast. I watched it again, and I'll say it is not rewatchable compared to these other films. I thought these other films were superior to... So if I had a bottom of my list, Magnificent Seven is there. Yul Brynner was just not... They dressed him in all black. And he's supposed to be the cool one that puts together the team of all these quick shooters to defend this poor little town of Mexicans that need someone to help fend off the Mexican, warlord Eli Wallach that's coming into town. And, it's great because you see Robert Vaughn and James Clyburn, and this is one of the earliest, I think, Charles Bronson films. I don't know the timeline of Bronson. I'm not an expert on Charles Bronson. I will tell you, it is possibly the best Charles Bronson scene I've ever seen because it reminded me of my grandkids. And I'm only doing this because I want to make sure this is on film so my grandkids will know how much I love this scene. I shared it with my family so they could see that. I wish we had time that I could share with you. So there's a scene. Charles Bronson, clean shaven, cowboy suit up, right? Clean, right? Got his gun, his rifle. These three little Mexican boys kind of come up like they're tiered, right? So everybody's face has got to be on camera. And they tell him how we picked you. We picked you, sir. He's like, what do you mean you picked me? Well, we have you, so we'll be there cheering for you. And if you die, we'll be the ones that'll be putting flowers on your grave. And he was like, well, I hopefully will let you down and you won't have to do that. And he's like, I think we'd rather have you alive as well. He's like, the other kid goes, well, maybe. And then there's a pause, and then the littlest kid goes, maybe. And it was golden. It was the best. Bronson's responding to this with like a bigger and bigger smirk. It was one of the better scenes that doesn't get talked about. I actually couldn't find a YouTube clip of just that piece. It's frustrating. I'm going to keep searching for it because that was one of my favorite parts. It's still a good film. All-star cast. It moves pretty quick. It's all right, but it's at the bottom of my list. The reason I kind of went on the backstory with the Hollywood movies is because I think the best Western of all time, which is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, is part of a trilogy of movies called A Fistful of Dollars. Called the Dollar Trilogy. The first one is A Fistful of Dollars and A Few Dollars More. These are Clint Eastwood movies. So the story of Clint Eastwood is, he was on Rawhide, and he's this good-looking guy. And it's like, what do you do with your career? You're not getting the gig that you want. And this is where the term spaghetti Western comes in, because they go to Europe and they're filming these things in Spain, and spaghetti was like an adjective to be derogatory. These are lesser. Mm-hmm. And again, it's not got the big orchestra. It doesn't have the big glamorous shots. But when you watch it, it actually holds up. They're better now because we prefer to have movies that are more realistic and believable. And the Sergio Leone films are definitely that. They're dark. They're gritty, dirty. Clint is just perfect. He he has that intimidating look and that scowl, those eyes. And he also has a sense of humor. So I was telling somebody today about it, and I was really struck. There's two elements of Fistful of Dollars. Well, there's three really that makes it a classic. Remember the end of Back to the Future where he has the little metal plate under his little poncho and pulls it over because he made it to a bulletproof vest? That comes from A Fistful of Dollars. Okay. So it's this. He's basically a bounty hunter. He shows up in this town. There's two rival. One group is running booze. One group is running guns. So he's gonna, well, you pay me and I'll kill that guy, and you pay me and I'll kill that guy. He's in the middle of this mess, and the opening scene when someone tries to confront him, he goes by the Undertaker. You know how these old westerns are, man. The Undertaker's right there building a coffin. Remember how the scene was in Back to the Future where they're like, let me take... It was exactly like that. So he walks by and he could get 3 coffins ready. He shoots, ends up killing 4 guys. So he walks by and goes, my mistake, 4. So it's funny, it's fast, and it's cool, right?
So is this all before he started producing and all that?
Yes. I'll get to that because this is still he's filming these over there. Mm-hmm. This is like 65, 66, and 67. They were all done over there. They didn't come out here until after that. So then they brought all of them in, and they kind of branded them all like they're one trilogy, like they're actually like the same. He has this mantra of the man with no name, this bounty hunter assassin that rides into town. No one really knows what his name is. And each of the movies, they call him by a different name. Like the first one, I think, is Joe, but he doesn't really say, hi, my name is Jim or whatever. Like, or they'll say something like, well, what is your name? Or I didn't catch your name. He's like, I didn't give it. Those kinds of things. But Good and the Bad, the Ugly is where the whistle comes in, that wah, wah, wah music, the colors. It's incredible. The showdown where you have 3 guys, right? Each one's got a gun on someone else. And you've seen this ripped off in tons of other movies. Like there's a famous Tarantino movie where there's 3 people pointing guns. It's exactly the scene. But he has secretly taken the bullets out of one of the gun. That, it held up so good. I was so thrilled that I actually sat and watched these again. A couple of them get a little long, kind of boring, a couple parts. But at the end of the day, they're really, really good.
He's the star of these movies.
These 3 movies. Yeah. So he comes back to America, and that's when he begins his own career. He starts directing Westerns. He does this, man with no name kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I'm watching the one now. It's called High Plains Drifter. It is super dark. Like, this would be one I thought would get a warning. This is way worse than The Searchers.
And that's also a Western.
Yeah. Yeah. He a woman who's basically like... the townswoman kind of comes on to him, but then he basically rapes her by our 2020 standards. It's not a romantic old Western scene. It's literally like, there were not romantic Western love affairs back then. It's like, oh, we're in a barn. It's brutal, right? And, toxic masculinity all the way.
Well, that's what you think of when you think of...
I know, that's what I think of. Well, I think of that with the Old West. Yeah, I think of that of the Old West. All right, so that was kind of where the list kind of started, and I put some of that together, and then I kind of got down to the 3 modern films. There's 3 really good modern Westerns. There's probably more, but these are my 3 that I enjoy watching. And then to me, the factor is how much would I want to rewatch them? Are they entertaining enough that I could sit through them again multiple times? So the first on that list is probably True Grit, the newer version of True Grit. Jeff Bridges stars as that John Wayne, the patch over the eye, Rooster Cogburn, the little girl, Maddie, where she's hired him to kill the guy that killed her dad. They have Matt Damon and Josh Brolin. Jeff Bridges is why this movie works. The Coen brothers make it darker and funnier. But Bridges, it's just transformative. He does not get credit for this performance. It makes John Wayne's not look good. It's really amazing film. You would love watching it. It's really a good film. So if you get a chance to watch the new True Grit, definitely recommend that. And I'm talking like a 9. This is really top-notch, top-tier movie. Tombstone is the lesser of the 3 as far as a rating would go. Like, it's more like I can give it a 7 or maybe closer to an 8 on a scale of 10. But it's all-star cast. Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer and Sam Elliott and Bill Paxton and Powers Booth and Michael Rooker is the guy that plays Yondu, and he was Merle on The Walking Dead, and there are literally like 12 super famous people in this Western, and it is very good contextually in being historically accurate, like at least the general scope of it. The Wyatt Earp narrative of him coming to town with his brothers after he has this legacy and trying to get away from that, getting sucked into this mess with basically just bandits. But have you seen Tombstone?
No.
Oh man, Doc Holliday is portrayed by Val Kilmer, and this is by far the best acting performance of Val Kilmer's life, and the best portrayal of a Doc Holliday, because he had tuberculosis. So he's performing it as though he's in a constant state of sweat and not feeling well, coughing up blood in different scenes, always looking pale, and he pretends to be weak and then goes into a gunfight and just mows the guy down. And it is just a tremendous, and it's so rewatchable because there's so much things that happen. Historically, there's a lot of debate about these people. It's really much more interesting to understand that the difference between good guys and bad guys in the Old West is a line of being in the right town in the right way. And that takes us to Unforgiven, which is by far, you mentioned that one.
I've seen that.
It's by far the best modern. It may be the best Western of all time because it's so rewatchable. You watch it again, and Clint and Morgan Freeman and Gene Hackman and even Richard Harris, who plays the English Bob character, do such a great job of depicting this Old West life and style. The Gene Hackman version of that Little Bill sheriff, that violent sheriff, is a lot of what we think Wyatt Earp may have been like. He may have been more like, well, how do I make this good for me? You're not coming to my town, assassin, just pummeling the guy with the butt of his gun. You know, that kind of person is a lot of what some of the Wyatt Earp stories are. He's not really this good guy we think of him as. But I will say, after watching them all, I did come away with at least a renewed entertainment for enjoying the Western as a genre, because I don't spend a lot of time watching Westerns. I don't seek them out, and I don't enjoy... There's a lot of other Westerns that have been done over the last few years that I just have enjoyed and kind of like, it was okay. You know, so it's not something I'd recommend for people that don't really care for Westerns. But I do love some of the historical elements of capturing the time and how difficult life must have been. You know, you go into a hotel and they're like, well, you got to pay someone to give you a bath because they got to heat up water and pour it in. If you don't get in the tub and they're pouring it in, it just gets cold before you can even get in the thing. So we just don't think about these things. Do you ever think about or come away with watching a Western, or are these certain elements that are at least being captured? Or
yeah, well, like I said earlier, I mean, Westerns I just don't watch. The only reason I watched Unforgiven, I don't know how many years ago that was, a couple decades maybe at least.
92.
All right, 3 decades. Was because I'm such a big fan of Clint Eastwood. So that's what drew me to it, but I've never watched it again.
Well, I think you'd enjoy the Good and the Bad and the Ugly series, just because of the nature of... This is where it really began. This is where that element of that, let's have non-Hollywood produced, gritty, darker, capture what it was really... It's tough, man. I mean, it was brutal. It was really done well, of life in those towns and some of that kind of stuff. It was pretty good.
Do you put Unforgiven as Clint's best movie?
Oh, I don't know. I'd have to really go back and look at the whole list, make sure I was not being... It's pretty close. It won an Oscar. I'm pretty sure he didn't win the Oscar. It won about 5 out of like 9 or something like that. I think Hackman got supporting actor, and I think design and sound and editing may have... It's just technically a great film.
Did he produce it?
I think he directed, wrote, starred he did the whole thing, and that is his last one. I think that's the bookend. He's like done, and most people are like, I don't want to do more Westerns after that one. Like there's a lot of aversion, because I didn't include it on this list because I haven't watched it in a minute. I didn't get to one. Pale Rider is also another great Western of his too. It's another man with no name story. You know, he's a preacher, collar on. People think he's a preacher. He comes into this mining town and helps them fend off the bad guys. Not a whole lot to it. Not a lot of good.
Sounds like an intriguing story, though.
But it was interesting, and it was good. And he's just so good as this quintessential assassin, bounty hunter kind of guy. But going back to those very first ones and seeing him in his youth, the humor is, to me, what I was most surprised by in rewatching them. Was they're technically very sound. And those end scenes, these end shootouts that they contrive for these different movies, all 3 of them are different. And the villain in at least one of them, he plays more of a kind of a quasi bad guy like Clint. It's just amazing. Van Cleef is his last name. Lee Van Cleef, I believe, is his name.
Do you see Clint in any of those early Westerns from the 60s any of that coming out into the Dirty Harry of the
Absolutely.
70s.
Totally Dirty Harry. Totally Dirty Harry. Especially by the time you get to Good, the Bad, the Ugly, where he's really got it down. He's really got what the gritty bounty hunter looks are going to be, and he's kind of staring. He's got this cigarette thing he's doing all the time. You can definitely see him transitioning to that behind the big gun is where that comes from. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. You definitely can. And once Dirty Harry comes into play, you can see how Clint's career is never going to be the same, because he can pull off something that's different that most people are not seeing. And again, the time of that, right? So Dirty Harry and Death Wish, gun laws in America, crime in America, all that, it just fuels that as being something people want to go see.
I'm going to take you back a few years. There's actually a Clint movie that I really, really enjoyed right around that 70s time frame, and it was called Play Misty for Me. Do you recall that?
I've seen it once. I don't think I've seen it in a while.
You weren't a big fan? Yeah.
No, I've seen it. I'm not saying I even not a big fan. Yeah.
Yeah, and he had a stalker.
Sure.
Very, very creepy movie.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah. The good stuff. It's really good stuff. So, anyway, folks, tell me what you think. Maybe you like Westerns, maybe you don't. On the cancel topic, when does Blazing Saddles make that list?
Why would be the reason?
Blazing Saddles?
Yeah.
Oh, even though it's mocking racism, it is so offensive in some ways. I mean, oh man, Blazing Saddles is brutal. So, all right, best Westerns of all time. Maybe you got a favorite. Maybe I'm just completely wrong and you're going to correct me. I can handle it. Go ahead, tell me what you think. But I think Unforgiven, totally the best. Rewatchable, great film. True Grit, probably technically sound right there. And then I think Tombstone behind that as far as rewatchable. I don't even count The Good and the Bad and the Ugly and the other two, Fistful of Dollars and A Few Dollars More in the same category. They deserve their own category, because we wouldn't have those versions now if it wasn't for those. It's just different.
Pops. Pop culture.
That's good. He's all serious though. Hey, we're News Talk with Brandon and Bob. We're here to tell you about some of the facts so you don't have to waste your time watching CNN.
We don't want you wasting any time with CNN.
Or Fox, or MSNBC, or some of these other guys that are making a whole lot of money.
Et cetera, et cetera.